Tell us your name and your job title and your duties for your job.
My name is Donna Busche. I am the manager of environmental and nuclear safety. My current job is to coordinate the preparation of the dangerous waste permit, which is what we use to demonstrate compliance to the state in environmental space. And we coordinate the safety basis documents for all 4 of the DOE nuclear facilities at the waste treatment plant.
Are you still currently employed by?
Yes, I am.
URS?
Yes, I am. And I am still key personnel in the Bechtel contract with the Department of Energy.
All right. But you have come forward as a whistleblower, is that correct?
Yes, I have.
And what is the basis of that?
Primarily I have been on this particular project since early 2009. I've been raising significant issues related to the adequacy of the safety documents, the adequacy of safety being implemented in the design. And over, probably the first 2 years it was okay, but things have started to heat up where as I continue to hold, my position to insist that we do things safely, the treatment by both Bechtel and URS has really caused me to have concern that my job was in jeopardy. So I filed for whistleblower protection because of specific actions that they had taken that led me to believe I was being retaliated against, harassed, a very hostile working environment. So I filed for protection with the Department of Labor.
So talk about the relationship between the DOE, URS, and Bechtel.
Okay. The Department of Energy is the owner and the operator of what we call the Office of River Protection. It's a specific Department of Energy office there at Hanford. There's several. It's the one that I'm affiliated with. They have a prime contract with Bechtel National Corporation. Okay. On that contract, URS, which I work for, is a subcontractor to Bechtel. Okay, so they have a teaming arrangement. They are the prime subcontractor that Bechtel will use predominantly in the areas of nuclear safety and commissioning the plants. So I was brought there in 2009 because of my experience in developing safety documents. The Department of Energy was very pivotal in getting me on the project to make sure, because they knew of my standards and performance on other projects. So when I was brought to the project, I was added to the Bechtel's contract with the Department of Energy as key personnel. So what that means is I'm highlighted in the contract as being the individual responsible for providing that specific element for Bechtel to the Department of Energy.
Can you go into some details about items that you perceive as significant problems on this project?
The most significant safety issues are also, I would say, very linked with a lot of the technical issues on our pre-treatment facility. So the way the project is designed, we have the Hanford tanks that are another contractor with the Department of Energy. So there's 177 underground storage tanks with a lot of highly radioactive waste. The pre-treatment facility is to receive that waste, okay, through an underground storage line, and then condition that waste. It'll take out the cesium, for example, and then take it on to the rest of the, there's 3 other nuclear facilities. That particular facility has issues on, we currently have not solved how are we going to mix the waste, how are we going to transport the waste from one tank to another tank, how are we going to adequately control criticality, how are we going to control hydrogen detonations in either vessels or pipes. So there's many, many technical issues with the design, and by nature, they're safety issues. If we don't know how we're going to do the activity, and then my organization can go in and help build in an additional layers of safety on top of that, it's kind of a compounding problem. So since I've entered the project, there's many of those technical issues were known, but as we continue to try to solve them, the design has progressed, and with the design progressing without the safety issues being resolved or the technical issues, we get to a point that every day it gets a little harder, right? So they've poured the walls, they've placed specific equipment. So in some cases we can't put fire barriers where we're supposed to put fire barriers to make sure that we protect our equipment. So it's a very big facility. I mean, it's bigger than a football field, it's several football fields. It's a very big process. And there's many, many technical issues. So
And how far are we in this process now?
I think we're approximately 60% designed, if I remember correctly, and about 20 to 30% constructed, but that's not something I necessarily pay attention to. I'm focused on making sure that when the designers, the Bechtel designers, are actually working to figure out how to place the pipes in the plant, or how many filters do we need, or what types of filters, that my specialists, my nuclear safety specialists, are making sure that the right specifications are getting into that design. So I'm focused on getting safety into the design, so I don't really keep a tick mark on how much construction we have. That's, the safety professionals, we're focused on getting it into the design, not how far along we get. So we prefer to get it in before you build it, as opposed to after you build it, trying to backfit it.
And how many specialists do you have working for you?
I think approximately, I bet I have upwards of 100 people now between environmental and nuclear safety. Yeah.
And did you have any hand in selecting those people, or did you inherit the bulk of them?
Recently, there has been a significant effort to actually hire. When I took over the organization, it was completely understaffed for the size and the complexity of the facilities. So I would say the first year and a half of my tenure, I was focused on getting the budget so that I could go out and hire those people. So we've aggressively hired, I would say, 20 to 30 people in the last year. So in bringing those on and trying to get them into the project. But it's very complex. So even though I've got 20 new resources, they have to get trained, they have to understand the problems, and they may be great specialists, but it does take time to get them up to speed.
So when did you first start getting resistance to the safety features that you wanted to implement?
I think that's a difficult question, because I do it every day. I would say that the biggest resistance probably came around the summer of 2009, where it started. The Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board was asking a lot of questions. I reviewed some of the project's position, and I'm like, no, we can't do it that way. That's not adequate. The specific issue happened at that time to be how we control hydrogen in our pipes. Okay, so that particular issue is still unresolved. I've still had the same position. I've testified now twice in public forums with the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board on that particular issue, and that is, to me, again, this is my perception of how I'm being treated. That is the most significant area where I get pushback from Bechtel and then my corporation, because I'm not supporting, it's good enough, it's reasonably conservative. So my concerns haven't been resolved on how we're going to control hydrogen in those pipes.
Prior to this, had you had much interaction on the project with the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board?
Throughout my career, since I've done nuclear safety, I've interfaced with the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board on the Hanford project. When I worked at Rocky Flats, I worked with the site reps there. In my previous tenure with Hanford, I worked with them. I used to work for the Fluor Corporation, so I've worked with them off and on for 20 plus years.
So at that point in time in 2009, that you had already had a regular rapport with them?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And was that unusual at the time for them to show concern with that particular part of the project?
No, they are actually, they're a group that's actually mandated, by federal law. They have a charter to do oversight of the Department of Energy, and they have been steadfast in the 20 plus years I've had the pleasure of working with them. They're very steadfast in doing adequate detailed design reviews, so they will normally go in and review every contractor around the complex. Hanford's nothing special. So in the summer of 2009 is where they were starting to ask some of the same questions that I had. We then moved on, those comments were not resolved, and then it kind of accelerated into a public meeting in the October of 2010. So those issues continued to fester, lots of internal disagreements. However, the design continues, right? So as I think that's a lot of what I consider the angst and the concerns are, we're continuing to build the plant, but we haven't resolved the technical issues.
So after 2009, did you notice a marked increase in resistance from either Bechtel or URS towards the safety concerns you were raising?
Yeah, it's like a constant. It's if it interferes with the progress of the design or the ability to construct, it's a very challenging day to go to work every day and say, I can't support releasing that document. I can't. We need to go do these additional steps, or we need additional accident analysis, whatever it is. And we produce thousands of documents on this project on any given month, and my organization will review a large percentage of those. So many of the concerns are either brought to me by my staff, some documents I review personally, so it's really a mixture. And when you're perceived as a person that says no, I perceive I'm doing my job, right? That is my position. If it's not adequate, I'm there to say no. They view that as they don't welcome the no answer very well.
What would be their response specifically to the concerns you're raising? Are they just saying that they can't do that, or would they try and get you to change your analysis?
They haven't actually asked to change the analysis in any way, shape, or form. I think the difficulty was we didn't have adequate staff, okay, to actually prepare the analysis. So there would be pressure to either release a document, or they would release a document and not have it go through my organization for review, right? So then when I would find out about it, right, I'd get a call or a question, hey Donna, what's this about? I would then go pull the document and issue comments on the document. Right? So by that time, the engineers, they feel they've done the right thing, that it's not, I don't think they did anything on purpose, right? So they're just designers. They didn't know they needed to incorporate in that requirement. So when I would raise those, I think it's a human reaction. They don't like being told it's not good enough, right? So, but we have to stop and pause and time out, and that's what we do. But on all those occasions, management in general their immediate reaction is not to what do we have to do to resolve the concern, it's what do we do to meet schedule? What do we do to make sure we don't stop construction? So it's always this incredible pressure to do something, anything, to continue the construction machine.
And my understanding is that the Bechtel and URS on a project like this, meeting the schedule is key towards them being able to make profit on the project.
Absolutely. There's actually project performance goals that what we call a cost performance index and a schedule performance index. If either one of those numbers fall within an unacceptable range, the Department of Energy will hold fee. So the Department of Energy actually drives them for performance. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But when that type of pressure, from whether it comes from the department or from either one of the contractors, overrides safety or quality, it's a bad thing, right? You don't get it. There's some types of nuclear accidents you don't get a do-over in. So,
were you part of the recent meeting in March with the DNFSB?
Yes, it was.
Can you tell us what that was about and what came of that?
The intent of that meeting was twofold. It was to follow up on the first public meeting that was in October of 2010. To understand that the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board has written several letters to the Department of Energy. They've issued recommendations to the Department of Energy. And what that means is the Department of Energy is really put on notice. The Secretary of Energy is put on notice that the issue in that particular letter is not acceptable, and then that recommendation goes to Congress. It goes to a lot of the appropriations committees because it's pretty serious. The department must step in, right, and change a specific thing. So whatever there is. So there's two outstanding recommendations. One is on the safety culture of the WTP, and the other issue is on the mixing system. The ability, like I said, those technical issues. How are we going to mix the tanks? How are we going to process that? So those are two open recommendations. So the March 20th meeting, or excuse me, was it March 20th? March 2012, but it was about that time frame, was to follow up on the mixing recommendation and the technical issues that we have on the project. That was a session that I participated in, and the second session was on the safety culture. So the first session I felt was quite amicable, right? Both Bechtel, and then I was on the board, I believe, representing Bechtel and the project in nuclear safety. The Their commitments to the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board are really what the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board has been advocating for a while. So that doesn't mean we've resolved the technical issues. That just means we've acknowledged that we have to address those technical issues. So that was the first session. The second session was focused on I think the tougher issue right now at the waste treatment plant, which is somewhat, surrounded with me. The initial recommendation from the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board to the Secretary of Energy talked about the safety culture, and the individual named in that letter as the unnamed safety professional, okay, that they had identified as actually me. So that was part and parcel why I think I was a participant in that meeting, and the Defense Board, I won't say they protect me by any means, but they are concerned and they're watching how nuclear safety is getting addressed and specifically how I am getting treated on the project.
At some point in that meeting, were they asking you about what needed to be done on the project at this point?
Multiple times. I think the primary commitments that I was making in this meeting, I was talking about the adequacy of the safety documents that are prepared by my organization, that by the time I have gotten there, they had degraded to such a state that and I use the word, I have to reconstitute that safety basis. So I pretty much gave an overview of the plan that we've been working on to go in and reconstitute that safety basis for the pretreatment facility, and there's other issues at the other three, but they're not as significant as the pre-treat facility.
And when you say by the time you got there, do you mean by the time you got to this project at Hanford? Or?
No, by the time I got to the public meeting. So, right, so we'd identified it probably, I think, want to be back about in the January timeframe. I said, when you've looked enough at the safety basis document and I'm trying to define the right controls, we didn't have adequate analysis to make sure that we could actually support design. So I said enough, and I pretty much told the department and the project we need to reconstitute the safety basis.
And what's the current estimate of how long that would take?
I would say it's going to be upwards of 2 years, year and a half, 2 years.
To get to the point where?
That the nuclear safety specialists can actually help us, the collective us, understand exactly how significant an accident could be, or how big a spill could be, how big a release could be, and we will then take that information and then make sure that we're designing the right levels of protection into the design.
So 2 years from now, during that same 2 years, is the project on hold or is it moving forward?
It is currently on hold. We are rebaselining for budget reasons, not for the reconstitution reasons. So construction has slowed way down. Design is continuing, and to some extent that's okay, right? Because the design, I have to have enough information about the design to say, oh, what happens with that pump or what happens with that valve. So part of that is okay. So, but I suspect that between now and I think August or September, I'm working, I have staff working specifically to get all of those nuclear safety actions to reconstitute that into the new baseline for the project.
You mentioned mixing tanks. That's one of your concerns as well as on the project. Tom Carpenter of Hanford Challenge showed me some photos of what I believe was a test run for mixing tanks that involved running them for a 48-hour period.
Okay.
And it appeared that the amount of corrosion on that in the test that photos I saw was significant.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So let's talk about the waste. So the waste that's in those underground storage tanks it has all of the processed chemicals from whatever facility it came from at Hanford. It's got chunks of metal. It's very abrasive, okay? It's kind of like taking sandpaper in a liquid form. So as we're doing the mixing, okay, those mixing tests that you're seeing, we're actually forcing air through the waste, right? So that's the motive force. That's how we do the mixing. I say it's forcing air, but it's really a suction mode thing. But what happens is it's a very abrasive, it's a constant hitting, like sandpaper, blasting sandpaper on these metal vessels, the nozzles, the wear plates, right? And so it has the ability to erode and corrode. Now, the reason Donna would care about that is I have the vessels, these pulse jet mixers are inside of a big vessel, which are inside of what we call a black cell. Once we seal that black cell up, we can't go in there anymore. So if we don't design the vessel and these pulse jet mixers and wear plates if they're needed to make sure that that doesn't erode and corrode and create those holes, we won't have the ability to treat the waste in the underground storage tank. We'll basically lose a huge part of our process. So we need to make sure that that is very robust and we understand everything that's going on before we close up that black cell.
From that test, did you find that fairly surprising to see that much corrosion?
I was. The previous documentation provided to my organization was, oh, we've done our erosion calculation and our corrosion calculations, and it'll make it the full 40 years life, right? So the engineers had done a calculation. What the Department of Energy has identified in one of their surveillances is there are significant technical inadequacies in the way we've done those calculations. I'm not an erosion expert. I'm not a corrosion expert. What I need to make sure of on my side of the problem is that we can confine that waste so that it never gets out. So if you have erosion, if you have a corrosion, you can actually leak radioactive material, or in the worst case, you won't be able to process the radioactive material.
Talk further about the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board meetings that you've had. Have any members of the Department of Energy been present at those meetings, and what kind of interactions have they had during those meetings?
The Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board structures a public meeting. They'll pick who they want to be a witness or a panelist. So in the October timeframe of 2010, I was on a panel with senior Bechtel executives, DOE executives from headquarters. The ranking DOE official was Dr. Trier. She was EM1, so she was the highest ranking Department of Energy official overseeing the waste treatment plant. So the Defense Board picks the cadre of folks that they actually want to drill down and ask questions, and they start to make sure that the owner, DOE, right, is making sure they understand the department's position. Then they go to the prime contractor, which in that case was Bechtel. They had specialists up there from the Northwest National Laboratory, and then they had folks like me that have a specific job on the project. So. The meeting was, I think, a little bit in that time frame. That meeting was very contentious. The Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board was not satisfied with the responses they were getting to some very technical questions. One of the defining moments was a discussion on deposition velocity, where the environmental management individual, Dr. Trier, was not really answering their questions. So the Chairman Winokur was getting very frustrated. She wasn't answering the question. The floor was then turned over to a question to me by Joe Bader, and he asked me this. I consider it the straight man question. Donna, are you comfortable using a technically inadequate a number in your document? And I'm like, no. It was just a simple no. There was a follow-on question, which I also said no, and that session ended. But there was other discussions also related to how we're going to handle hydrogen in pipes and ancillary vessels, and I communicated my concerns on the inadequate model that was being developed, the complexity of how we would have to operate the plant. So that was pretty much a 14-hour day, and then after we closed for the day and walking back over to the space where we're trying to debrief, I would say confronted by Dr. Trier in a very admonishing tone. When she was asking me where I had been, I tried to alleviate the tension and make a joke. I have a tendency to be a jokester. And I said, I think he's returning my Christmas card. I may have made him mad. And she said, well, if your intention was to make people mad, you made everybody mad. So at that point, because she is the highest ranking DOE official in the room, right, she's the ultimate customer, and it had been a long day, I chose to leave. So subsequent to that, there has been closed hearings from the Defense Board, which we really can't talk about, and the tension on the project, specifically towards me, has continued to accelerate. And then the Defense Board issued, as a result of some of those tensions, a safety culture recommendation to the Secretary of Energy. And some of those examples are actually cited in their recommendation.
So do you believe it was at that meeting where the level of tension was ratcheted up significantly?
I believe it was a pivot point, right? So up until that point, I had been trying to solve the problems on the project and been trying to work and solve it. In a public forum, when you testify, I took a definitive position, right? So I've actually testified now to the board that oversees the Department of Energy. And my position hadn't changed a year before, and it hasn't changed a year and a half after. I mean, I'm still committed to my technical position.
And remind me again, is it an advisory board, the DNFSB? Are they an advisory, or do they have the power to actually implement changes with the Department of Energy?
They do oversight of the Department of Energy. They're not an advisory board. So they will issue questions, comments, and when those are not resolved to that oversight agency, right? I look at them as an oversight board. They have the authority. They can then go to Congress with their concerns, right? Because that's who funds the Department of Energy. So they really are the only thing we have out there right now that are adequately doing oversight of the Department of Energy.
And were they created by Congress?
Yes, I believe they were.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So where are we at now then? I mean, you had this recent meeting in March with the DNFSB, and you continue to work out at Hanford on these issues.
It's a challenging day. Every day I go to work, I have a job to do. I won't say it's the most pleasant environment. In most cases, I feel that I'm either being completely left out of the loop or isolated, right? So they don't want to ask Donna the question because they don't like Donna's answer. To just downright refusal to address the problem. So if we are in a meeting, right, it's like we're not even going to have a real discussion. So it's pretty frustrating. But at the end of the day, I've got a job to do. So I review the documents. I make sure my staff understands my expectations, right? I issue formal comments when I need to. And I'm absolutely committed to making sure that the plant gets designed correctly.
And does the public have access to reports and or comments that you make?
I don't. They're not classified in any way, shape, fashion, or form. I'm sure they could probably request them, right, through the proper FOIA channels. So it is done at the behest of the Department of Energy. They can absolutely get copies of all of the safety documents that we write, right, that my organization will coordinate, and the dangerous waste permit. Those are actually in the Department of Energy public reading room.
But it sounds like it kind of falls on citizen grassroots groups like, let's say, Hanford Challenge,
yes,
to relay key findings and actions happening there at Hanford.
Yeah, Hanford Challenge has been an incredible support network to actually make sure that I have the advice I need, that the message is getting out, because it's, myself, there's quite a few other high-profile folks also that are working very hard to do the right thing. But when you're up against two big corporations, it's very hard to get the message out. So we rely on Hanford Challenge to support us, right? And sometimes it's just a phone call for support. It's not, they don't do anything, but sometimes you just need to talk something through because it's been a challenging or a difficult day. And they're steadfast in their commitment to making sure Hanford is done right. And I think that their overall commitment to making sure we get the waste out of the tanks, right, is the things that we need to keep up the pressure. So we need the vitrification process. We have to get the waste out of those tanks. Current projection is the waste will, by the time, if we solve all the problems, let's say magic happens in the next year and a half, the tanks will be 100 years old by the time we get the waste process. It's a much safer place to be in a glass log. So the technical issues are worth solving. They have to be solved right? And we have to get the waste out of the tanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much for
Welcome.
your time.